All right, it is time to pull the plug, pull the trigger, let the cat out of the bag, whatever you want to use. Yeah, we're just gonna move right into it. Let's see how I am with this YouTube magic thing. All right, did it work? Okay, some of you may have seen this in the background. It's been sitting on the floor over there in the shop for a little while now, actually since Ceph, and this is a Top Flite Beechcraft V35B. This is one of those planes that I kind of always wanted, always thought, oh, that's kind of cool, but civilian aircraft don't do a whole lot for me. Now, you guys have seen on the channel, I've done civilian aircraft before. I did the Piper Tri-Pacer before. That was a fun build. Had a lot of really good fun, a lot of really good teaching moments with that. But the Beechcraft here is a little bit different, so let me explain why. The Beechcraft Bonanza is one of those aircraft that, to me, is one of the airplanes that it really captures a transition. So this airplane first built in like 1946, at least designed in 44, 45, and then 46 and onward. And the V-tail was a major departure from traditional tail designs, okay? Now, that being said, if you look at a lot of modern civilian airplanes, the shape of the airplane follows a lot of the same lines. And that is what I think is game-changing, is that you have this overall shape that started and is carried through even to today, and I think it's just a pretty marvelous platform to begin with. Now, aside from it being the doctor killer or the dentist killer or what, I've heard a number of different killers, it is a just beautiful looking ship. That's why I want this model. So, did I build this? No. I traded for it. I traded for this model. There's a number of things wrong, but a number of things that are really right with this model. Number one, the covering's not that bad. This model was put together quite some time ago. It's not terrible, but there are some issues with it. So I've addressed a lot of things from the get-go. So let me go over that from stem to stern. Yeah, it's a ship. That works. So starting in the very front, the first thing I did was remove the cowl to inspect the engine. First thing that I want to note is this is an OS 4-stroke 91. This is the Surpass, and it has the pump. It has the built-in pump. That's the pump down there. The idea is that there's no pressure needed from the muffler to go back into the fuel tank to help push the fuel into the carburetor. There's a self-regulating pump. Really nice engine. I think it will pull very, very nicely. Cool thing is when I pulled the cowl off, the carburetor spins completely freely. Not stuck at all. No residue. There's not even a stain on the exhaust, which means, like, has this engine ever run? I had my doubts, but I'll get more into that later. The other thing that I did was I replaced the prop. There was a 13-inch prop, which is a bit small for this engine. I had this 16.6 prop in my drawer, and it fits much, much nicer. Okay, moving on from there. All of the tubing was more or less good. I have replaced a couple of lines of tubing, and I also added tubing clips to every single joint because I had them, and that's insurance in my opinion. I don't like fuel leaks, and you shouldn't either. You shouldn't stand for it. So Dubro for the win on the fuel. Also did not have a fuel filter, which I added. These fueling valves, they're really cool. You stick the nozzle in and it only pushes the fuel one way into the tank. You remove it and it will allow flow to the engine. So there's only two real tubes to deal with. There's the main fuel line and then the vent line. The vent line was completely missing, so I added that. Not to mention the vent on the tank. Oh, well. I guess since we're moving back, I had to remove the entire cockpit, canopy, whatever. 4 bolts, the whole thing pops up, and was able to inspect the tank. The tank clunk, the tubing inside, everything was fine. No fuel in the tank, which leads me to 100% say this engine has never run. Now that to me is huge because that means I get to experience like all of the firsts on this model. Like this, I'm pretty sure this model has never flown, and that's cool, right? So that being said, there's a lot of apprehension here because I don't know how this model was built, but from what I'm seeing, everything is built very, very well, except for one thing. The one thing that was a problem on this model was the landing gear. Not really the mains, it was the nose. Now this has Robart gear throughout it, but the problem was the nose gear. The nose gear looked like it had just been an off-the-shelf unit, just a regular robo strut, and they had tried to hack it and modify it to shorten it, but the problem was they shortened it too much and the spring wouldn't stay in. Like, it just popped right out, like even though the fork was limited. Anyway, so thankfully Robart still had parts in stock, and I ordered two of this piece and this piece because they had them, and I said, why not? Because if these bend or break or anything, I'll have replacements. Cool. So there is that. Needed a new spring. Ordered that from McMaster Car. Pretty straightforward to do that and install this. Now, that being said, this was the proper Bonanza BZA part number, whatever. So it is actually the opposite side of what was intended. So I had to modify the hole in the nose to accept that, which I'm kind of okay with. If I end up really liking this model, I might do gear doors. Haven't decided yet. Anyway, so moving on from there. Still moving backward. The valve, the air valve. When I hooked up the wings and cycled the gear, the nose gear was opposite of the mains. So when the mains would go down, the nose would go up, which means this person probably never even cycled the gear on this plane to troubleshoot it. So that was pretty easy. I had to take the gear off, switch the hose for the airline. That way we're all set there. Let's keep going. Now, just as to complete the top side, outside, whatever of the airplane, you can see that there's lights on this model, and yeah, these are like old style. I mean, I can't even tell what's inside this, but I'm assuming it's an incandescent light. It runs off a 9-volt battery. There's a light in the tail. There is actually a light in the nose. I'll get to that in a minute. But all of those lights, they don't work. It's on an old system that uses that 9-volt battery, and that's got to go. So I have an LED kit for it, but we're missing a couple of things. So some little details that were just like double-sided taped on, like a radar antenna. So those are little details to come as well. But overall, you can see that the airplane's in pretty nice shape, and mechanically very, very good. I haven't even really cleaned this thing yet. It's just been sitting in a corner, and I've been tinkering on it off and on. So let's flip this over and dig into the inside, and we'll keep moving aft. With the fuselage flipped over, we can see we've got our air fill valve as well as our air fill gauge, which is nice. Our V-tail servos, we've got our steering gear servo as well as a throttle servo and a retract servo. Okay, that's a S3101, not a big deal. And then we've got our airlines for hooking into the wing. Just for people who know, like, I prefer to keep my airlines connected so that I know that there's no dust or debris to get in and possibly damage the inside of my pistons. Up to you, your mileage may vary, but that's what I do. Anyway, moving along, you can see here's the switch, the main switch for the receiver. There's no battery in here. I've just got a cheap Radio Master for now, for doing ground testing and stuff. I'll update that to something more appropriate. But yeah, you can see that this is kind of a mess, this light system here. Just very, very old and dated, and the wires are kind of crunchy and stiff and not good. We're going to ditch all that. But what's worth noting is that the same Futaba S3004 servos are throughout the whole model. Now, I know some of you might be saying, oh, that's great, Futaba servos. Yes and no. This is an old model, at least 20 years old, okay? So those of you who have not been on this earth very long, plastic gets old and brittle as it ages. The gears inside of these servos, yeah, they're plastic. They're not metal. They're not carbonite. They're not any of the modern stuff that we have. The torque settings for these servos probably sufficient to fly this airplane, but there is something to be said about the plastics. Now, this also, so I had a conversation with my friend Logan about this. Just to summarize, there is a difference between plastics of today and the plastics of yesterday. Okay, so yesterday or yesteryear, whatever, the plastics were virgin plastics. So what do I mean by that? It means the first time that the plastic had been molded. When you get into recycled plastics, the remolding, the plastic is fatigued. It's like when you bend a paper clip back and forth. You bend it once, it's fine. It holds its shape great. You bend it back and then back into shape, it doesn't hold the same, okay? It's the same with plastics. The more that you use them, the more that you recycle them, the less useful they actually are because the plastic isn't as strong. So the plastics of yesteryear, or in these servos, I'm like 100% sure that these are virgin plastic. However, there is something to be said about experience, because there are people who have flown on these old servos where the gears strip out because they're just old plastic. So I will be updating all the servos. That's probably the hardest part about this model, is that I've got at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 servos. 8 servos that I have to replace. It's crazy. I mean, the bulk of the cost from this project is going to be servos, getting decent servos in here. So I'm considering Metal Gear servos. Anyway, enough of that. Let's keep moving on. So as you guys know, I am a huge Dubro fanboy. So we have already upgraded to Dubro tires. Again, the Leo has been updated. This is brand new. I did take time and polish the fork because I'm me. And I went in and serviced the fuel tank, as I mentioned before. The rubber bands that were holding it down, ditched those, put it in cable ties, as well as the rubber bands for holding the air cylinder, using cable ties for those too. Not a huge deal. And that's pretty much it in terms of what has been done here. Let's move on to the wing set. All right, with the wings laid out here on the bench in the shop, you can see again some of the really cool details, like these stickers that are on the front. And like I said, like the lights in the wings and the details there is just so cool. So cool. Even took time to paint some red here for pinching. Like if you were to assemble the airplane, there would be the red there to help avoid pinching. That's just cool. But the connections, you've got the strobes, and then the red, and then the right, and then you've got let's see, either flaps or ailerons. They're not labeled, so yeah, anyone's guess. And then your retract tubes that go to your airlines on the inside. Not a big mystery there. We're being held on with 2 nylon wing bolts, pretty standard procedure for top flight. And then on to the bottom, we've got a very well constructed, nice and straight wing that feels very solid. Again, replaced the nasty old tires with Dubro, and these all work just fine. I've lubricated these as well as put in some fresh grease. It's a pretty straightforward process. All you got to do is remove one of these E-clips, push the rod out, and then the whole strut will come out, and you just put some fresh grease in there. And yeah, we've got more, again, of these S3004 servos, wing and flap. We've got some really nice offset hinge flaps. Again, very nicely done scale model. Really just, they don't really make them like this anymore. They just don't. But that being said, we've got some problems with the covering, where there's this clear layer that's peeling off of the white layer underneath. Okay, and it's happening on several spots on the plane, the belly of the airplane as well. I'm not sure why this is. I think it's a monocoat thing, but it is nevertheless a little disheartening. So some of that will need to be repaired moving forward. So that is on the to-do list. Additionally, I would like to see some gear doors on this, because that's part of the look of this airplane, especially when it's landing and on the ground. So that is on the to-do list. Let's get the wing off the bench, and I'll show you some of the other things that I have. All right, so here we have the cowl that's taken off. Really nice, strong fiberglass piece. You can see the wire system where they had an actual plug here that would plug into a port on the fuselage. This is a pretty common Radio Shack part back in the day. I remember this from a kid. That's to help like keep the oil and fuel out of the airplane and keep it in front of the firewall. All right, smart guy. Give this builder props here. And then moving on, I've got my tried and true light set for the de Havilland Beaver. It's got all the lights that I need. It's got the top red one. It's got a landing light. It's got the so there's the landing light that is right there. See? Landing light. I get to replace all of that and make it pretty all over again. Really cool. Here's my extra parts, my extra Robart parts, as well as the screws for the cowl. I always try to take a servo box and keep parts in it as I do one of these restorations. And then I've got, of course, a new fresh Dubro spinner. There was originally a Dubro spinner on here. Did I throw it away? Is it in the trash can? I don't know. It was yellow. It was no longer white. Okay. It just needed a new spinner. I didn't know what was on it, why it would not be the normal color. I wasn't about to ask that question. It was just easy to get a new one. So we've got a fresh spinner. It needs to be trimmed for whatever prop I land with. That prop will not be the final prop. I'll probably go with a Falcon prop. They've got some nice scale ones. That or Zor. I don't know. Haven't decided yet. Whatever. The civilian game is fairly new to me, and I'm excited to go along this journey. Now, what is the point of all this? The real big cool thing about these kinds of builds for me is that this is like a restoration, okay? I'm getting to do the fun little detail things that I enjoy. Really the goal right now is to get the airplane to a safe condition, which I'm nearly there. There's a couple of small things that I would like to do. Mostly clean the airplane. I want to clean the airplane and make sure that I'm starting with a blank slate. And then I'm going to get in to see the engine run. That's going to be the next video. I'll take you on the journey with trying to get the engine to run on this airplane. So I've got to assemble the wing, put the gear down, and we'll see if we can get the engine to pop off. And that'll be really cool. Dubro tank in there, by the way, was pristine condition. Yeah, then the goal after that is to make sure that it is running reliably. The engine is properly broken in per OS instructions. and then try to fly the airplane. I don't want to do any of the major modifications like the new light set or anything until I know that it flies well. Again, time. Okay, time is a currency. Time is always the currency you want to spend the most efficient way possible. So that's on the to-do list. Thank you for coming along the ride. If you have a Top Flite Bonanza cockpit kit, please reach out to me. You cannot find these kits anywhere anymore. Even eBay does not have these kits. So if you have one and you're willing to part with it, let me know. Other than that, if you guys need any parts for your restorative builds, Dubro. Go to Dubro.com, use code Josh10, and get yourself a nice little 10% discount, and you will be well on your way to restoring your flying work of art. And I'm going to keep going on this one, as well as my fresh build. My chaos is going to be going, and it's going to be going great. So hang on for the ride, guys. We've got some really great projects coming up. And until next time, I'm going to keep working on my flying works of art.